We're on air.
Alrighty. So, hello everybody, and welcome to this evening's Clare Roots Society meeting. It's good to see a big crowd here tonight. So, before we go any further, can I please remind you all to turn off your phones, set them to silent, airplane mode, whatever you like to do. But just remember to turn it on when we're finished. That's the important thing. The other thing to let you know before we go any further is that there are some wonderful free books on your seats should you wish to take them home with you. So there's the Ennis Grottos and surrounding areas of Ennis. There's Ennis at Work in the 19th century and the Ennis Parish Camino. So nice little treat for those of you who've come out on such a beautiful summer's evening. So our speaker this evening is no stranger to any of you, I don't think, is the wonderful, amazing, fantabulous Paddy Waldron, who has degrees in mathematical sciences, economics and finance, and has been a lecturer and visiting research fellow in economics at Trinity College, Dublin. More recently, he has specialised in local history and genealogy, and especially genetic genealogy. He's been the chairman of the Council of Irish Genealogical Organisations from 2011 to 2012, and the chairman of Clare Roots Society from 2013 to 2017, and PRO of the Kilrush and District Historical Society since 2012. He's published in various local history journals such as the North Munster Antiquarian Journal, the Old Limerick Journal, Ballybrown Parish Journal, and an Irishman's Diary. And on St. Patrick's Day this year, he was appointed a Companion of the Clans of Ireland Order of Merit. See his fabulous, which is really cool. So his talk is entitled Collaborative Genealogy. And without further ado, I will hand over to you, Paddy.
And my assistant will turn off the microphone and share my... Oh, you've shared my screen to YouTube. You can take yourself off the YouTube if you want. Okay, I've given this talk a few times before in other parts of the country. So I just call it Collaborative Genealogy. I have some notes of what I'm going to say and some links to relevant web pages. And they're on my own website, which is pwaldron.info. And the full address is pwaldron.info/Clare Roots/2025. And as you can see, we're trying to record it for YouTube, and the link will be circulated later. So I'm going to begin by talking about the history of the DNA and genealogy industry as it has become. Then I'll ask you a few questions to see what you know and what you think and what you've done. I'm going to kind of assume most people here are probably somewhere in the DNA system. Am I right? Who has not sent their DNA anywhere for analysis? Oh, quite a few, including some of our own committee members. So hopefully I will convince you at the end of why it's worthwhile doing that. And my favorite collaborative genealogy website is wikitree.com. So that would be the second half of the talk. And I will leave you with the list of links to more advanced features of Wikitree to go through yourself later on. There won't be time to go through it all. So how has genealogy changed? I said in the good old days, we all had rolls of wallpaper. So I said I would dig out my grandfather's family tree. This is how it all started. And hopefully those watching on YouTube can have some little idea on the video of what I started with about 50 years ago. So I don't think there's anybody still doing genealogy on rolls of wallpaper, because since the 1980s, we've had personal computers. I started with personal ancestral file in 1987, recording my information electronically and reprinting it over and over again as I learned more information or as new people married in or were born into the family. Then the 1990s came along and the World Wide Web, and people discovered, oh, you can upload this stuff to a website, republish it online. And probably by the end of the 90s, people were probably entering their data directly onto websites. Then at the turn of the millennium, genetic genealogy began. Family tree DNA now has a big sale on to mark its 25th anniversary. We're 25 years into the new millennium. It started out with Y-DNA comparisons. Y-DNA is the part of our DNA that is inherited along the direct male line, like the surname. So it was really only any good for surname studies. By the 2010s, we had the much more popular autosomal DNA comparison. That's the part of our DNA that we get 50% from our father, 50% from our mother, 25% on average from each grandparent, 1/8 from each great-grandparent, and that allows us to make connections with cousins on all sides of the family. But in order to find out how you're related to your DNA matches, you need to compare family trees. So we needed some way of doing online family tree comparisons. And we now have a multitude of DNA comparison websites, and many of us have a multitude of online family trees, hopefully duplicating each other, very often conflicting with each other. So we need some sort of collaboration to put some order on this mess. I was always a fan of doing my own work on my own computer, controlling my own backups, not battling with slow broadband. I had a long life in front of me and I had a relatively small family tree. Now I have 250,000 people in my genealogy database, and my life expectancy is 38 years, approximately less than when I started putting it on the computer 38 years ago. So my views have changed, and I think it's time to stop reinventing the wheel and we should start collaborating. So I said I look forward to what we can expect in the 2030s. Is that big enough for the people down the back to read it, or do I need to blow up the font? Fiona's nodding, so I presume she's better eyesight than me. People continue to do pure research in history, in genealogy, in genetics, in computer technology, come up with new discoveries. As in any research field, people want to exploit those discoveries commercially. Most people using these genealogy websites, most of us in this room, want long-term accuracy of our family history before we want profits for the shareholders of the genealogy companies. Unfortunately, the big website operators and their shareholders want short-term profit, and they don't care about accuracy if they're making money out of sloppy research. So what will be the outcome of this battle? We all hear about artificial intelligence these days. It uses feedback loops to learn from its mistakes. So if a genealogy website was any good, it would have some sort of feedback loop where we could tell it that's wrong, and it would assess whether we're more reliable than the person who gave it the information in the first place. And it would use not artificial intelligence, but real intelligence of the people in this room to correct errors in family trees. AI has been used to speak English, which is a very complicated language with large language models. My personal view is surely it's going to be much easier to train a computer to put together a family tree, which has a very simple set of relationships, husband, wife, parent, child, sibling, etc. I would have thought it'd be much easier to create an artificial system to put family trees together, but that's not what we're getting from the ancestries and the MyHeritage of this world. So I think the world has to head to an era of collaborative genealogy, where we integrate the traditional roll of wallpaper genealogy, the DNA comparisons that have been going on for the last 25 years or so, and the AI that has hit the world much more recently. In particular, if you're doing a surname study, collaborative genealogy is essential. We have lots of surname studies in the world coming at it from different angles. We have family tree DNA running 12,172 projects. Most of those are surname projects, studying individual surnames or groups of similar surnames. We have the Guild of One Name Studies, based in Britain, I think, which has 2,132 one-name studies and has a DNA section as well. And we have the people who gave me this silly medal, Clans of Ireland. What did I do wrong there? There's the list of Irish clans which are affiliated with Clans of Ireland. Some of the big surnames that you'd expect to be on the list are not on the list, but there's quite a few affiliated clans. There are some surname organizations that haven't affiliated to Clans of Ireland. So what I'm going to talk about is worth becoming familiar with, whether you're the traditional genealogist researching all sides of your family, whether you're a surname specialist concentrating on everybody with a single surname, or whether, like probably the majority of those in the room, you're a genetic genealogist trying to trace your relationships to your DNA matches. So let me say a little bit about where the DNA and genealogy industry is today. We have many DNA and genealogy websites. We have this half dozen sites that I've listed down here doing autosomal DNA comparisons. Competition between them, economists would tell us competition is healthy, but they also talk about natural monopoly, and there's also unhealthy competition where the outcome is not as good as you'd expect. What competition does is it drives down the price. There's half a dozen companies doing autosomal DNA comparisons. They're comparing 22 pairs of chromosomes for as little as $30 to $100. There's one company doing Y-DNA comparisons, family tree DNA. They're only looking at one chromosome, not 44 chromosomes, yet it costs several times the price of the autosomal comparison. Is that because there's no competition, or is that because there are technological difficulties? It's probably a bit of both. I've already asked you, have you submitted a DNA sample for analysis? I hope if you have, you're fishing in all of the major websites. If you spit for Ancestry and for 23andMe, they will turn your DNA into a computer file, which you can upload basically for free to the other 4 websites. They'll all entice you to buy additional features at a small charge. I tell people who haven't got their DNA on all 6 websites about Murphy's Law of genetic genealogy. I was asked to help a Mrs. Murphy who was adopted a few years ago, and she had her DNA on 5 of these 6 websites. And after 2 or 3 years, we got her to spit for 23andMe. It turned out she had a full brother, and his DNA had been on 23andMe all the time. By not being there, she had missed the opportunity to meet him for a couple of years. There's no logical reason why we should have 6 different websites to deal with. DNA comparison, I think, is a natural monopoly. All of these websites would be more valuable if everyone was on each one. The reason Ancestry is the leading performer is because it now has 20 or 25 million customers, and that's its only advantage over the smaller sites. Things are beginning to consolidate. Find My Past had a partnership for about 5 years with Living DNA. They're both based in Britain, and Living DNA have been very slow to get off the ground, and Find My Past pulled the plug on that one a couple of years ago. You probably all heard the scaremongering in the last few weeks about 23andMe, which has filed for bankruptcy protection. There are some people who are very worried about a company which has their DNA changing hands in a bankruptcy sale. Most of them probably aren't even aware that shares in the company have been changing hands in the stock market since it floated a few years ago. I don't see any difference between my DNA changing hands in the stock market and changing hands in a bankruptcy sale. So I'm hoping we'll have further consolidation. I'm hoping that one of the smaller companies will take over 23andMe. That will be, I won't use the word that Mr. Trump used yesterday for Ancestry.com, and get it to improve its standards. What all these companies are also finding is that selling ongoing annual subscriptions is more profitable than selling one-off purchases. So you get one of those snazzy iPhones for nothing, but you pay through the nose for the service for the next few years to the company who's providing it. DNA is going to go that way, I think. Whole genome sequencing means looking at the entirety of your DNA. What the ancestries of this world are doing is only looking at a tiny sample of all the locations on your DNA. So we've been hearing for at least 5 years now that whole genome sequencing is getting cheaper and cheaper. But whole genome comparison is a whole different story, because these companies have put huge sunk costs into using technology, which is quickly becoming outdated. So I don't know when it's going to happen, but I suspect that eventually all the DNA companies will be doing whole genome comparison. But people said that 5 years ago, and it hasn't happened yet. So as well as many competing DNA comparison websites, there are also competing collaborative family tree websites. I'm not sure which is the biggest. I have my opinion on which is the best of these 4. FamilySearch.org is run by what used to be called the Genealogical Society of Utah, which is the genealogical division of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormon Church to you and me. They're the people who came and microfilmed all our Irish genealogical records, probably back in the 1950s or 1960s. It's thanks to them we've had civil registration indexes online long before the Irish government put civil registration information online. It's thanks to them that the National Library has parish register microfilms covering most registers from most parishes up to about 1880, which we've had online since about 2016. And Family Search have long been advocates of a single world tree. So there is my pedigree chart in the Family Search tree. And the theory of all these collaborative trees is there is one profile in the database for every individual who has ever lived. So there's only one copy of my father, one copy of my grandfather, and so on. Genie.com has been taken over by MyHeritage, one of the big commercial firms. I got locked out of Genie.com a couple of years ago when there was what they called a credential stuffing attack on 23andMe. Some bad actor trying to log in with usernames and passwords, email addresses and passwords that had been used on other websites. And all the genealogy websites were terrified the same thing will happen to us. So they forced us all to change our passwords. Genie.com didn't realize there were some people who'd been members for 10 years whose email addresses from 10 years ago were no longer valid. I had to open a second account. I had to create a duplicate of myself. And then they wanted money to merge the duplicate that they forced me to create with the original me. So that doesn't really work. WeRelate.org might have been the first. It never took off. It's been around since 2005. Wikitree.com, in my opinion, is the best. I should have done the screenshot. Oh no, I was clever. I hid my birth date because I'm logged in as myself. My birth date is exposed here. So that's what my profile on Wikitree.com looks like. There's my ancestors on my father's side. We need a bigger screen to show fathers and mothers on the same screen, or I could shrink down the font size. I'll show you lots more of Wikitree as we go on. So shouldn't hosting a single world tree like this also be a natural monopoly? How come we have many competitors in the business? They all have these same ideas: a single, accurate, editable, correctable, online, worldwide family tree, one profile for everyone who has ever lived, and links to the DNA data of those wishing to be included on the tree. And that's what sets Wikitree apart from the others. Family Search has no DNA links. Genie.com does have DNA links, but they're not nearly as good as the Wikitree ones, in my humble opinion. They all have their advantages and shortcomings, but they all have the same goals: to help us in extracting, comparing, and tracing our DNA, tracing it back to which ancestor gave us which component of the DNA, and compiling, comparing, and combining our family trees. If you have 3 third cousins all working on the same ancestors, it would be nice to be able to combine their work. And that's what Ancestry.com is, and MyHeritage, are trying to do with the trees that have been donated to them by their users. You give them your tree and they sell it to their next wave of customers, and they don't give you any royalties. And they make a pretty bad job of combining the trees. So I think none of the legacy websites have succeeded in achieving all of these goals or harnessing the power of collaboration between their users. There's genealogists from Clare, including 1 or 2 in this room, who are already contributing to bringing about the ideal collaborative tree. And I hope I'll encourage you by the end of the evening to try. So let me ask you a few more questions to see what sort of experience we have in the room. Who hasn't started recording their family tree for posterity? Nobody. You wouldn't be here if you hadn't started. How many versions of your family tree do you think you should maintain? Who thinks 1 is enough?
Ideally 1.
Ideally 1, exactly. Or who thinks maybe you should have a public one and a private one, with the divorces and other scandals in the private one and not in the public one? Maybe. Who thinks you really should have to do as many as there are competing DNA websites? No, waste of time. Where do you keep the master copy? If you have to keep multiple copies, I know people who keep multiple copies and they'll change all of them and they'll have differences between them and they won't know which one to look at for the authoritative version. Is there anyone still using pen and paper to keep their family history? Oh, quite a few. Time to get a computer. Some of us prefer to write narratives, a book that you can read. Some of us prefer to store things in a database format. Some of us prefer to create in one format and read in the other format. So some of us might still be using word processors and spreadsheets. Anyone here still using word processors and spreadsheets? No? Who's using standalone genealogy software? Something like Ancestral Quest. Where's my Ancestral Quest? There's my pedigree chart in Ancestral Quest. I should have had it open at the right screen when I started. You can do similar things with Reunion, Roots Magic, Family Tree Maker, other things. Then some of us use MyHeritage, the Ancestry website. One of my experiments in an online family tree a few years ago was with tribalpages.com, which has never really taken off. Next question is, do you make regular backups? Who makes your backups for you? Do you believe in cloud computing? Do you believe if you put it in the cloud, it'll stay there forever? If you ever had an email address with Vodafone.com or any of the other cloud computing businesses that went out of business, you won't rely on a multinational to do your backups for you. If you ever used Facebook Live rather than StreamYard to do something like this, you will have got an email in the last few weeks from Facebook saying, we're just about to delete all your Facebook Live videos. So don't trust anyone to do backups in the cloud. Do your own on your own external hard drive and keep a couple of copies in different houses in case the house burns down or anything. Don't be like a co-author I once worked with, who shall remain nameless, who was paranoid about backups. He had a laptop, he had an external hard drive, and he had a little USB stick. And after every editing session on our joint project, he copied the master file from the laptop onto both external devices, put all three in the same bag, and then got on the bus with the bag. Thank God he never left it on the bus. So the moral is, the more duplicates and backups we create, the more likely at least one version is to survive for posterity. So maybe that's one of the benefits of having all these competing websites out there. They may not all last forever, but if you're on all of them, one version of your work may last forever. The next question is, when you're looking at a DNA match and you find your long-lost fourth cousin, and you both put together the family tree and work out, this is the great-great-great-grandfather we've been looking for years. Who does all the editing? Do you both have to do it? Do you both have to do it on each of the 6 websites that you have your DNA on? Or wouldn't life be a lot easier if we all collaborated and just did it on, one of us just did it on one website and everybody else had access to read it and to improve it? There are compromises involving control over your work. Maybe you don't want to allow anybody else to edit your work. Workload, maybe you'd love to have somebody help you with the workload. Accuracy, maybe your collaborator is a little sloppy or dyslexic or not as good as you'd like them to be at typing up a nice biography or whatever. Speed, in the early days it was much faster work on your own computer than rely on broadband. Broadband speeds have got a lot better. So we have these multiple collaborative world trees, all with similar objectives. And Wikitree has a slogan, it's not your tree or my tree, it's our tree. We all have the same ancestors if we go back far enough. Most people in this room have roots in Clare going back many generations. If you go back to the 1700s and the 1600s, we all have the same ancestors. We have 10 generations back, we have 1,000 ancestors in one generation, 1,024 ancestors. The population of Clare 300 years ago, which would be about 10 generations, it'd be very hard to pick 2 sets of 1,000 without some overlap. So we'll have some in common. There are duplicates going to be created in a collaborative tree, and ultimately the objective is merge the duplicates. You can have 2 people tracing back to the same ancestor who don't know each other, and when eventually they find, oh, this is the same person, and they merge them, suddenly they both learn. The real problem with online commercial websites is that errors go viral. Ancestry will say to a potential new computer, tell us who were your parents and your grandparents. If you don't know, just guess. And those guesses are what they sell on to the next wave of innocent customers. So one error immediately goes viral, and there's no way of stopping it. And the only way to convince people that the record is correct is to document your sources. And that's something that Wikitree in particular is very insistent on. There are differences. Family Search, as I said, have been going around collecting microfilming records for decades, and they've decided, let's extract all the information in the records into our one world tree. So they've indexed the Irish civil birth records from 1864 to 1880, when every family had 10 children. So they take each of those 10 birth records. Each record has 3 people in it, the father, the mother, and the child. So they add the father and the mother and the child to their one world tree. So they end up, you have the 10 children and 10 copies of the father and 10 copies of the mother. That doesn't work. Genie, as I said, is semi-commercial. That doesn't work. Wikitree has the best emphasis on DNA confirmation of relationships, and I'll show you examples of that in a while. But there are other world trees that you mightn't realize are out there. They're uneditable, uncorrectable, they're behind the scenes. They're what Ancestry DNA and MyHeritage are using for what they call through lines or common ancestor hints or theories of family relativity. Every time you get a DNA hint from Ancestry or MyHeritage, that's because they have built their own behind the scenes single world tree, trying very unsuccessfully to aggregate the very bad guesses of their many millions of customers. And there's nothing you can do about it. I'll show you some of my bad ones in a minute. So I think I already talked about what you do when you make a new discovery. I'm going to skip that section and go on to the benefits of Wikitree. People ask me, what's Wikitree? I say, it's like Wikipedia for genealogists. Is there anyone here who doesn't use Wikipedia? Everybody's heard of it. So it's a collaborative encyclopedia where anyone is free to contribute and to correct and to add. There's a little bit more moderation probably than there was when I started contributing 20 years ago. Wikitree is essentially the same sort of crowdsourced genealogy. The genealogists are volunteers. The genealogical information is open source, done by volunteers. The programmers are largely volunteers as well. There's a small team of about a dozen people that keep it running. Then there's a very large team of application developers who add all the nice features that the full-time staff haven't time to get around to. And that's all open source programming. So you can get in. I haven't got into the programming side of it. You're very welcome to get into that if you want as well. How old is it? What's its pedigree? It was born the 5th of November 2008. There's an annual celebration. I looked at this today. It's still the information on last year's annual Wikitree Day. I'm sure there'll be another one in November of this year that will go up there. It's essentially married to the DNA websites, or particular GEDmatch, MitoYDNA, and to a lesser extent 23andMe. Will it ever die? We'll all die. Probably all websites will die. Will it outlive us? Has it a better chance of outliving us than our own research has if we don't publish or share or document properly? It's thought about that. There is an advanced directive that you can put to give some other Wikitree member the rights to take over the profiles that you manage. I'll talk about the various privacy levels in a minute, but it keeps living people and recently deceased people with a certain degree of privacy, or it allows you to give them a certain degree of privacy, but then when you die, you don't want that record to disappear. You want to get it to pass on to somebody else who will respect privacy in the same way. The rule is that anybody who was born more than 150 years ago or died more than 100 years ago, the profile must be open and editable by any approved user. There is a promise that it will always be 100% free. All tools are free and all content is free. There's a promise that it will last forever, but who knows how long forever is. Our shared tree will live on in some way, even though the future is unknowable. And there are trusts in place to keep paying the bills if the committee all fall under a bus or something. And any cloud computing source like Facebook Live can evaporate. So I think life would be a lot simpler for genealogists if the DNA companies stuck to doing DNA, or one DNA company stuck to extracting the DNA, and one family tree company stuck to developing an accurate world family tree, And then you just agree protocols between the two organizations for comparing family trees. Family Tree DNA has recently outsourced its family tree work to MyHeritage, which from my brief experimentation hasn't worked as well as it should. 23andMe at one stage did try hosting family trees, and it has many years ago given that up. And if we had done that, then just one side of each match would have to update things, and we'd have this feedback loop to learn from each other's mistakes. We're a long way from that. So hopefully most people in this room will find some of their relatives already on WikiTree. It has only 41 million people on it, which is small compared to the population of the world today. But it does have a bit of a bias towards the English-speaking world because it was developed in an English-speaking country and it doesn't have the best international language support. But there's a lot of people in Germany and other non-English-speaking countries using it. So do we want to use intelligence or stupidity in compiling family trees? I call what the DNA companies are doing artificial stupidity. So let me just show you what Ancestry.com comes up with for my own ancestors. I know the house where my mother was born. I know who owned the land on which that house was built in Griffith's valuation in 1855. His name was James Durkin. I have his death certificate from 1865. It says he was 88 when he died, approximately, puts his year of birth at approximately 1777. That's what I've told Ancestry in my tree. So they think they found his mother. Margaritam Raftery, somebody who doesn't know Latin, has decided that you should record the name in the accusative case rather than the nominative case from a Latin parish record. But the only problem is she was born in 1789 when her son was 12 years old. I wish I could correct it, but there's nothing I can do about it, and they still keep giving me the same hint. They did come up with a tree checker a couple of years ago. They put it behind a paywall. We have a lot of good bloggers out there writing about genealogy. This is Tamura Jones, based in Holland, who came up, one of millions of people who came up with the point. The consistency checker should be built in to Ancestry from day one. It shouldn't be a premium product that you have to pay extra for. It's built into WikiTree from day one. If you try and add a mother 12 years younger than her son, you will get an error message and will be stopped. Ancestry doesn't do that. Lots of other problems with Ancestry. Ancestry is great for providing hints, but there's 4 different kinds of hints it can provide. It can give you a hint saying, this looks like the same person in another primary source. That's great. That tells you more about your ancestor's life. But it can also give you a hint saying, this is a namesake of the same person in the same database. Are you sure you've got the right Michael O'Dea or Adrian Donnelly or whatever? Could it be the other one? It doesn't tell you which hints are of which type. It gives DNA hints like the ones I've just shown, and they're hints based on the guesses of other customers largely. And the beginning users of Ancestry DNA don't even realize that they are dealing with an amalgam of primary source material and guesses of inexperienced genealogists. I'm baffled, actually, the number of Americans who come to me and say, I found it on Ancestry. I said, what do you mean? What was the source? Oh, I don't know. Ancestry. MyHeritage is nearly as bad. It has theories of family relativity. At least it allows me to tag them. So 9 of mine are people that already appear in my own family tree. Of the other 52, 13 are confirmed, 39 I have rejected. At some point, a friend of mine shared his family tree with me, and somehow I became linked with his ex-wife on the family tree. So half of my DNA hints are based on the assumption that I'm my friend's ex-wife. I finally got that taken out of part of the MyHeritage system, but they only run these theories of family relativity about once a year, so I still have all those nonsense hints and still live in hope that they'll go away eventually. And my top hint is for my so-called half-aunt. She's actually my first cousin. She's 23 years to the day older than me. She appears in my family tree. If I review the DNA match and scroll down a little bit, There's the family tree saying that we're first cousins. Using DNA alone, you can't distinguish a half-aunt from a first cousin. The average amount of DNA shared is the same for both relationships. But if you know the age difference, if one is a generation older than the other, well then the half-aunt is more likely than the first cousin. But her father was 8 years older than mine. My father married late in life. There's 23 years between us. But the DNA side of my heritage isn't talking to the family tree side of my heritage, so it's giving me two conflicting verdicts. We have a question from the audience.
What do you mean by a half aunt?
One grandparent in common, a grandparent who married twice. Full aunt has two grandparents in common. I should have remembered to repeat the question for those on YouTube who won't hear the questions from the audience. Question just was, what do I mean by a half aunt? There are other websites that are trying to integrate DNA and family trees. What are the odds? Now, what are the odds plus is an excellent one, which I have used very successfully to answer questions like these. I have an unknown parent, grandparent, great-grandparent. I have a mystery match. I have a cluster of mystery matches, and so on. I won't go into that. It's beyond the scope of tonight's talk. There's a thing called Banyan DNA, which I haven't played around with very much, which is an extension of What Are the Odds, set up by Leah Larkin, who was one of the developers of What Are the Odds. That's worth playing around with. There are third-party sites that do a lot better than MyHeritage and Ancestry at this sort of stuff. Family tree DNA is great if you create linked matches on your tree. It will trace the DNA segments back to the appropriate common ancestor. And then I say it's like a fisherman throwing the fish back in the water. Then it will only tell you whether the match is maternal or paternal, even though it might have worked out it's from your father's mother's father's mother's father. It doesn't tell you that. My other bugbear is if you upload a family tree where you haven't filled in dates of death, most of these websites will assume, oh, there's no date of death, this person is still alive, even if their children were born 300 years ago. So Louis Kessler is another of my favorite bloggers who about a year ago wrote this excellent blog about an algorithm for excluding living people or identifying living people on a family tree. And we wish that the big companies would read that and use it and do it properly. But all of them will still give you lots of privates. So you will get messages from DNA matches who you think have seen your ancestors on your tree, but you see the private version with the private people. They're seeing the public version with the people missing a date of death marked as private, and it's no help to them. So ultimately, I say life is too short and your family tree too large for it to remain practical to do it all on your own. When I finally got fed up with Ancestry was when I looked up one of the Limerick Palatine families, and I found there were 404 different ancestry trees that encouraged me to check for information on this person. 404 is the code for a missing web page. So I thought that was a nice coincidence. And then I said, there's probably even worse than that. And I thought of Brigham Young, one of the founders of the Mormons at the time when the Mormons believed in polygamy, born 1801, died 1877. There is his WikiTree profile, very snazzy with images and everything. He had 12 siblings. He had lots of wives, many of whom he married in the same day. They're not numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 screenfuls of wives, by whom he produced no less than 57 children. So it's not surprising that he appears in 13,169 separate user-donated trees at Ancestry.com. And that was growing at 20 trees per week when I looked recently. But in the last few weeks, it's come down. It's come down again by another 3. It's down to 13,166 since last night. So things could be getting worse. The only exception to the rule on WikiTree of one profile per person is an adoptee who has 2 identities, one with adoptive parents, one with birth parents. And there are structures in place to link the adoptive profile to the birth profile. And like any DNA-related website, it seems to be used disproportionately by adoptees because they're using DNA comparison to find birth parents that authorities have covered up. There's lots of other unique features. How do you use it? There's a very simple sign-up page, and a note to myself, because I'm logged in that browser window, I need to open a new browser window to show you the create account. All it wants is your first name, your last name at birth. It identifies people by their last name at birth plus a number. So I'm Waldron 201 because I was the 201st person born Waldron to register, and a password and an email address, and prove you're a human being. There are 5 different levels of free membership. It's funded by advertising, but the only people who see the advertising are those who are not logged in as contributors. You can join with a guest account and you still see the advertisements. You can join with a family member account, you'll see the advertisements, but you can communicate with other users. You send a message via the website and it arrives via email with your email address to continue the conversation by email. If you're going to contribute, you become a wiki genealogist. That requires accepting the honor code, which has 9 points, if I remember correctly. We collaborate, that's what I've been talking about all night. We care about accuracy, that's what I've been talking about all night. We assume that mistakes are unintentional. Most of them are unintentional. Don't get angry if you find somebody's got something very wrong. Be courteous to everyone. Respect privacy. As I said, you're allowed to keep the profiles of recently deceased and living individuals private. I'll talk about the different levels of privacy in a minute. Respect copyright, give credit, cite your sources, and keep everything as free and open as possible. I don't think anyone would object to any of those points. Some people tell me they're pie in the sky. It's a utopia that will never happen, but I think it's worth trying. When you sign up, you will get a message from a real human volunteer greeter. There's a whole team of greeters that answer questions from beginners. There's a new member question and answer session by Zoom. The next one, by coincidence, they happen twice a month, is at 1 a.m. in the morning. So if you're convinced by me that this is a good thing to sign up to, stay up till 1 o'clock and join in the Zoom conversation. They do weekly Saturday roundups on YouTube. The 7 levels of privacy are totally unlisted. You won't be found in a search or anything. Private, your surname, I think, might appear. If you're private, you can choose to make your biography public. Private means nobody can edit it unless you put them on your trusted list. If you're private, you can decide to make your family tree public. Everybody should at least do that much. There's not much point in being on a genealogy website unless your family tree is public. You can make both the biography and family tree public. You can make everything public, but not give editing permission to the public, to all the members, or you can make them completely open so that anyone who signed the honor code can edit. So you will keep your living close family members with some degree of privacy, and your long dead ancestors will be open and editable by all contributors. If you already have a family tree anywhere else on a computer, you can export it in the standard GEDCOM format, and Wikitree will allow you to import a small GEDCOM file. The only problem is the first part of the import is you have to go through every individual and check the hints. Is this person already in Wikitree? Should we merge your information with the existing information? So you don't want to upload 5,000 people and have to tick off all 5,000 before you actually get to add the first one. So your software should be able to maybe just export your direct ancestors and start with maybe 100 people. And I'm happy to help anyone who wants to get started. So you can link your DNA kits to the a DNA kit can be linked to the profile of an active member or of a deceased person. So if your brother has done DNA, he will have to sign up separately for Wikitree before he can add, or you can add his DNA information. That's their interpretation of GDPR. They don't want you and me adding every one of our DNA matches without their explicit permission to be signed up. There's a simple form. That's the page where I have added my tests, and if you click Add New Test, it gives you a drop-down menu of the different tests it recognizes, and it gives you a little optional space for additional information. I'll show you later how I use that. So for example, let's look at the DNA kits listed on my profile. I have uploaded the details of my Y-DNA, which I got from my father, who got it from his father, who got it from his father, and so on back along. I've done the 111 markers. I've done the big Y500. I just realized there's a sale on big Y500 to big Y700 upgrades at the moment. I'm going to finally upgrade. And there's a little link there to the additional details that I have added. It tells me the other men on WikiTree with whom I would share my Y-DNA if my family tree was correct. It highlights my earliest known paternal ancestor from whom my Y chromosome came to all of these people. And down here in the comments section, I have listed all the Y-SNP mutations I have from M269, which is thousands of years old, down to BY14499, which is hundreds of years old. Not everybody thinks of putting that in, but I discovered lately that that was possible. What about Brian Boru? Everybody in this room has probably heard of Brian Boru. High King of Ireland, died in 1014. The originator of the O'Brien surname, which claims to be the oldest surname in the world, perhaps. He has a DNA section, which you can jump down to by clicking up there. He has one Y-DNA relative, Conor Miles John O'Brien. Some of you may have known the second last Lord Inchiquin, who died a couple of years ago, who sold Dromoland and built a fine new house beside it. And Conor was a very keen genealogist and genetic genealogist from the very early days. His kit number on family tree DNA is 29,355. So he was in there within a year or two of when they started up. And this was his most recent confirmed Y-DNA SNP mutation, FGC13418. It appears on Brian Boru's profile, but because there's so many generations between them, that doesn't mean Brian Boru had that mutation. We think it actually happened somewhere in the 32 generations between Brian Boru and Conor O'Brien. And everything else fitted with him being a descendant of Brian Boru. In fact, I run the OD surname project, and we discovered many of the ODs have close DNA matches with Lord Inchiquin. But there's a tradition in the Clare ODs that they always had, in the medieval times, fostering arrangements between the O'Briens and the ODs. So it looks like at some stage an O'Brien son was fostered by the ODs and grew up with the OD surname. So now we have the royal ODs as opposed to the real ODs, who have a more distant relationship to the O'Briens. They're still Dalcassians. And I don't know how people do this on iPads and iPhones. You have all these pop-up hints. That little icon means find the relationship. So if we click there, we see that Conor was the 28th great-grandson of Brian Boru, with all the ancestors back along marked. Some of them have little tick marks to say that the relationship is confident. None of them, probably because I haven't gone in and done it, has a confirmed by DNA symbol. Sometimes on these you will see a little DNA indicator to say the father-son relationship is confirmed by DNA. I think we're happy enough that they could actually go back through all 28 generations. I got to know Conor through Genetic Genealogy Ireland conferences and the O'Brien Clan Association, which he was very involved in. So I'm actually the manager of his WikiTree profile. So what about the Clancys? My great-grandmother was a Clancy. My grandmother's best friends were two Clancy ladies who she thought she was distantly related to, and they were first cousins of Paddy Clancy, who was sentenced to death for his part in the 1916 Rising, reprieved, and then shot in Dublin Castle on Bloody Sunday, or the night before Bloody Sunday in 1920. I am co-administrator of the Clancy project at Family Tree DNA. My other co-administrator is a descendant of a James Clancy of Limerick, and he grew up with the tradition that he was closely related to Paddy Clancy as well, to the extent that on social media he calls himself Granny Clancy. And then you might remember there was a kerfuffle a year or two ago about a Sinn Féin Common being called the Paddy Clancy Common. And one of Paddy Clancy's Fianna Fáil relatives kicked up a fuss. And got our esteemed TD and former speaker to the society, Cathal Crowe, to stand up in the Dáil and read into the Dáil record that the direct descendants of Father Clancy object to Sinn Féin abusing the name of their glorious ancestor. The only problem with that is Father Clancy never married, had no children, has no descendants, direct or otherwise. Meanwhile, Sinn Féin produced a lady up in Kildare who, I think her mother was a Clancy, and she claimed that her grandfather or great-grandfather was Father Clancy's brother Thomas. The only problem with that was Father Clancy's brother Thomas was at home in Cranny in the 1901 census. The other lady's Thomas was in Durrow in County Laois in the 1901 census. So they were two different people. So we can't all be, well, maybe we could all be related to Father. So let me look. Here's my great-great-great-grandfather Hugh, and he has a DNA section, and his great-great-grandson Ger Clancy from Limerick kindly swapped for me a few years ago. And sorry, here's the Y-DNA section, which says that Ger's most recent confirmed Y-DNA SNP mutation is DC505. Keep that one in mind. Cranny Clancy's ancestor is James, and he's got a DNA section on his profile. And again, Cranny Clancy, using yet another pseudonym, confirms that says that his most recent confirmed Y-DNA SNP mutation was A933. Family Tree DNA now has this lovely tool that allows us to compare these two. And it tells us the most recent common ancestor of these two lines of Clancy's is estimated to have lived about 2,500 years before Christ. That's about 3,500 years before Brian Boru, about 3,500 years before anyone in Ireland was using any surname, let alone Clancy. So we can't both be from the same male line as Father Clancy. So Wikitree is a great way to find or disprove hypotheses like that. There is a margin of error around all these date estimates, but it's not 3,500 or 4,000 years. It might be a couple of hundred years, even when you go back a few millennia. While I'm on Clancy, I think I should have opened here. No, it didn't open properly. To check that while we were fiddling with other things. Another surname I have been studying is Cahir, from my good friend Jerry Cahir from Ennis, now living in Roscrea. And he's desperate to find the history of the Cahir family. The nearest we can come is some of us were at Harman Murtagh's talk in Shannon a few weeks ago about the Jacobite Wars and Viscount Clare and Clare's Dragoons. And I was astonished to hear that Viscount Clare had a stud farm of 32,000 acres on the Loophead Peninsula. That's basically the whole of Carrigaholt parish. And in the paperwork when he died, it names the man who was in charge of all of his horses, Edmund Cahir. So that's one of the oldest Cahirs we can come across. These tree apps on Wikitree are done by volunteer programmers. One of them is called One Name Trees. As you can see, it has loads of options. You can put in a surname, or you can put in variant spellings. You can put in a location to confine it. There's only less than 100 Cahirs. It lists all the earliest end-of-line Cahirs. It tells you how many Cahir descendants they have in the system. If there is DNA information for the descendants, you get a little Y to indicate there's Y DNA information, AU to indicate there's autosomal DNA information. I wish it would actually give us a little more place name information on that page. And you can do that for any surname. For a common surname, it takes a long while to load the page. That's why I loaded Cahir rather than Clancy. So that could be part of a one-name study. Wikitree encourages people to set up one-name studies. I think they should be run in parallel with the DNA surname studies on family tree DNA. I just put up a few links there to some of my own and my assistants' family names. So if you will, where do we start? We'll start with Wynne. And we will look at the Wynne genealogy page. Every surname has a page like this. if there is a surname project, there's a button up at the top with a link to the surname project. If we go through to that one, in fact, we'll see it's listed as a variant of WINN. Slightly limiting is you can only have 3 spelling variants show up in that way for each surname. Most Irish surnames have a lot more than 3 spelling variants. Some surnames have no project on Wikitree. I've put a lot of effort into the Cahir surname study. I've broken it down into how many sections? 13 sections with lists of the very early Cahirs. Here's the guy with all the horses in West Clare during the Jacobite Wars. We've no family tree for these ones in the 1400s and the 1600s. I've listed the notable bearers of the surname. There's other surname variants, an analysis of Y-DNA, lists of all those who joined the project, links to all the Cahirs on Wikitree. These pop-ups sometimes can get annoying. There's only 3 of us, myself and our good historian friends, Martin Breen and Luke McInerney, working on the Cahirs for the moment, and some of our objectives for what we might do. I think it's a great idea for anyone with an interest in a surname to set up a project like that, and I think Wikitree is a great place to host it. We're over time, but we were late starting, so we'll do a couple more examples before I wrap up. Most of you may have heard of the Sarsfield Homecoming Project. Patrick Sarsfield, hero in the Jacobite Wars, again is thought to be buried in an unmarked grave in Belgium, or to have been buried there until a few weeks ago when they dug up some bones, which may or may not turn out to be his. To identify him, the 2 DNA options are to look at his Y chromosome and see does it match present-day living Sarsfields. He's too far back for autosomal DNA to be likely to give him any matches with people living today. He lived 10, 12 generations or whatever in the past, and autosomal DNA gets diluted with recombination at every generation, and he won't have many matches on the autosomal alive today. But the other type of DNA that does persist is mitochondrial DNA, which follows from mother to daughter. So if we could find somebody with the same, mother to child, I should say, men and women have mitochondrial DNA, which comes from their mothers. Women pass it on, men don't pass it on. So if we could find somebody with the same female line ancestors as Sarsfield and get a DNA match, that would be wonderful. Wikitree has a wonderful system in principle for finding who should be mitochondrial matches. This is Sarsfield's most distant known direct female line ancestor, a Welsh woman, excuse my Welsh, called Ellen Ferch Willem Bultley. And this is a list of all her mitochondrial descendants. So her children, her daughter's children, her granddaughter's children, her great-granddaughter's children, and so on. So she was having children in the 1440s. And eventually, if we scroll down a couple of pages, here is Patrick Sarsfield and his 2 siblings. And in principle, we would love to find living people on this tree. Unfortunately, so far, he's the youngest that has been added to Wikitree. Boyd Guion, who's running the project from Mary Immaculate College in Limerick, asked me at one stage, could I build him a family tree of all Sarsfield's mitochondrial relations? I said, there will probably be millions because all the surname histories are written from the male surname point of view. It will be very hard to put them together. I say, wait until you get some mitochondrial DNA samples and some mitochondrial matches, and then we'll trace their pedigrees back, and it'll be a lot less work than trying to trace everyone on this page forward through another 400 years. So hopefully we'll have some DNA to work with in the coming weeks. Those are more or less the examples. I showed you how to set up the link. There's a link to how to do it if you have managed a DNA kit for somebody who has died. 23andMe is very annoying because nobody has a family tree among my matches on 23andMe. It's also annoying because it logs you out after an hour. But it does have this page that very few people know about, with a link to share a link to your online family tree. And when you click there, you can see the supported services. It also includes Family Search and Genie.com. And all you do is you type in the hyperlink to your family tree. So you take that hyperlink and change Waldron-201 to your own Wikitree link. Or you can put in a link to any of the others if you're not using Wikitree. But I encourage you to use Wikitree. I won't go into MitoYDNA or DNA portal. I already talked about degrees of confidence. I showed you some of the tick marks on the line from Brian Boru to Lord Inchiquin. I have a theory that my great-great-great-grandfather might have been Martin Galvin. So you can see when you look at my line of descent from Martin, I have confirmed the first 4 steps by DNA matches. Timothy Galvin, I don't know of any confirmed siblings of his that I have confirmed with DNA. There are tiny little matches, and the relationships are too distant to be completely emphatic about it. But certainly the Martin Galvin, I have a tombstone. If he's the right guy, he outlived his son by 3 years. I know where Timothy is buried. I know where Martin is buried. And I've just put a question mark to say that's to a certain extent speculative. There are tiny DNA matches and circumstantial evidence. So you can build a speculative tree, but you're encouraged to mark things as being uncertain. I'm not going to go into the details of DNA confirmation, etc. So I think I've talked for about an hour. My voice is about to give up. There is loads of further links there for you to explore and some of the good features of Wikitree. And I encourage you to at least give it a go. And if you want any help, I'm happy to provide it. And if you have any questions, Aileen has a roving microphone, so make sure you don't start talking until she hands it to you so that the people listening back to the recording afterwards can hear the questions. So thank you very much for your patience and for listening to me.
So there's no questions online. So do we have any questions from the audience?
Thanks very much, Paddy. That was fascinating, and I was actually smiling to myself there during it because my nephew was born on the 5th of November 2008. So obviously we'll have to rename him. But I've been watching that. I've been following Luke's progress on the Sarsfield project with great interest. If they can manage to link the DNA they find with a living Sarsfield, does that confirm without doubt 100% that that's Patrick Sarsfield, or is there more to it? Like, and I suppose if the second part of the question is if his name was not as uncommon as Sarsfield, imagine he had been Patrick O'Brien, would this project have been possible at all? Because there'd be too much. Do you know what I mean?
Very good question. Well, that's why they're hoping to use both the Y-DNA and the mitochondrial DNA to confirm that both parents are accurate. And they're inspired by Richard III, who was dug up in a car park in Leicester. And they did manage to find a living mitochondrial cousin, and the mitochondrial DNA also matched in that case. But it's never going to be 100% certain just because two people have a common female line ancestor. That's all you're proving, is the man you dig up has a common female line ancestor with the other people in the lineage. It doesn't prove exactly who his mother was. So there'll always be 1% degree of doubt that there could be coincidence somewhere along the line. It could be a different Sarsfield they've dug up. There could have been another Sarsfield killed in the same battle. There's all sorts of doubts that can probably never be eradicated. Paddy Keys.
Thank you. Paddy, you spoke about sharing your DNA, and you mentioned there about companies maybe that fold and gone, and things that happen on the stock exchange and selling data or whatever it is they do. Are there many instances of situations where people might have uploaded or dealt with a particular company and they hold their DNA data that actually have gone into receivership and it has disappeared?
There are cases of companies. Ancestry is notorious for buying up and closing down the competition. And I think in its early days, Ancestry was actually doing its own Y-DNA analysis, and it closed it down, and it, I think, destroyed all the samples. and they bought a company called Sorensen, I think, and also closed that down and deleted all the samples. So that caused a lot of anger at the time. So not only can your data disappear, but your dead ancestors' DNA can be thrown in the bin. No more questions?
No more questions. I think people may be tired, and we do have to be out of here by 9:30. Oh,
9.
sorry, by 9. We must be out of here by 9. Right. But since there are no more questions, I'm going to say many thanks for your excellent contributions. Thank you so much, Paddy. That was absolutely fascinating. I will have questions. I just haven't formulated them yet. So first things first, anyone who would like to bring home any of the wonderful books that are on the chairs, please do so. The next thing is a very important date for your diary. Everyone needs to put in Thursday, the 18th of September, which is our next meeting. And we are going to have Noreen Maher of the Hibernian Roots will be speaking on family stories and lore. So Noreen is a professional genealogist based in Dublin. She was recently featured on RTE for her work on Alison Amgram's family, the Nellie Olsen from Little House on the Prairie. So that's going to be really fun. And with that, I will say thank you very much. That meeting will be here at 7:30 on the 18th of September. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you.